Hi everyone, welcome back again. So this is the second in my little series that I'm making of short care guides, so species specific care guides for mantids. The last time I did a ghost mantid care video, and I'm trying to keep it in like 15 to 10 minutes, so try and stop rambling on these videos now. And today is going to be about budwing care. Latin name for budwing is Parasphendale affins, I believe. And yeah, these are also from Africa, so it's Eastern Africa, so that's like, what's that, Ethiopia, Tanzania, yeah, sort of that kind of area. That's where they originate from. And obviously coming from Africa, they're going to require some kind of heat if you're in a country that has not got the same kind of climate. So especially in like the UK, you're going to want like different heating elements, etc. So I would say these are kind of like a medium-sized mantid. So what I mean by that is like my female now, she's probably around about 6 to 7 centimeters in length as an adult. On my last video, I mentioned about ghost mantids being quite a nice beginner species, you know, they're quite tame. Budwings, from my experience, can get quite aggressive. This kind of happened around about subadult to adult kind of time. So up until then, she was absolutely fantastic and had a brilliant character. So they are really great mantids to keep as pets, but just be wary that they might go through puberty and end up being a total psychopath like mine. As always now, I'm going to be including a disclaimer, so I'm going to pop that in. If you could just pause the video and read that, or just read it afterwards, because there's some good information in there, and it's just what I'm trying to give you from this video and what you should probably do if you're considering getting any animal at all. Let's just get straight into housing then, shall we? So with your housing then, you're going to want something, again, that's 3 times the length of your mantis. So you can either do that and prepare an enclosure that's going to be fit for it for when it's actually an adult. But then if you're getting it at quite a young age, you're not going to want to put it in such a large enclosure because it's going to have trouble finding food and everything. You know, it's quite small. What I would do is suggest with any mantis is whichever one you have at that time, make sure that you're getting an enclosure that is 3 times its length as it is now. So 3 times length, twice across, twice this way as well. Again, I will refer you to my orchid mantis video. I've gone in a lot more depth and there's quite a lot of crossover between these species and the orchid mantis. It typically tends to be a difference in temperature or humidity or the type of enclosure. And what I mean by that is that certain mantids can't actually climb up glass or acrylic. Now, budwings don't have this problem at all. If you remember from my last video, they're not impusids. So yeah, these have no trouble climbing up glass or acrylic. So one of those enclosures would be absolutely fantastic as an enclosure for your budwing. Once you've sorted out the size of the enclosure, you want to make sure that it's got something nice to be able to hang from at the top. They do like to hang upside down from the top of their enclosures. My budwing, not so much, to be honest, compared to my other mantids that I keep. She does kind of have a little wander around her enclosure, which is nice, but still you want to make sure that they have got that support at the top, especially when it comes to molting. Now, on the subject of molting, the reason being 3 times and twice the size of your mantis is you want to be able to facilitate the molting process. Now, what I mean by that is that they will hang from the top and then they will come through their exoskeleton. So that's like double the size that they are, and then they need room to come up and hang and have a nice dry on the top and harden that exoskeleton that is. It'll be quite soft at that time, so you don't want to be handling or anything for a couple of days afterwards. That's the reason why we say as a minimum 3 times in length. Now, with your budwing mantis or any mantis at all, you really, I cannot stress this enough, you really need to make sure that there's adequate cross ventilation within your enclosure. Now, cross ventilation is just ventilation on the side, ventilation on the top. You've got a nice airflow coming up through it. Probably already combated that if you've got an enclosure with a mesh lid. Like I said, they're going to want mesh on the top anyway, but you want to make sure that there's a bit of an open top on there with mesh on so that they've got the ventilation from the top, and make sure that they have got some sort of ventilation from the side. Onto your substrate then, I keep mine on like a coir substrate. You can use like an earth type substrate, anything that's like organic, or just buy like the cocoa fiber blocks. That's what I do, and just soak them in some water and it just makes perfect substrate. And it also helps with your humidity with any mantis. Another option then is obviously paper towel or something, nice and easy to clean. You know, you can see when the droppings are on there and everything, and just roll it up and throw it away. So that's nice and easy for all that side of it. And also then you're probably going to want to decorate your enclosure. Now it's nice to have some twigs. Now I use kebab skewers in mine, so I use these long kebab skewers and I put them up in the enclosure just because it helps the mantis climb right to the top of the enclosure and molt from the top. Now I don't angle them or anything because I'm awful afraid of them molting from quite low down. And then obviously when I said that the exoskeleton is quite soft when they've come out of a molt, if they hit the ground or if they fall or anything, then you're going to end up with crumpled limbs or even deaths. So it's not worth it. I just keep any decor I've got nice and straight, and you don't want anything coming out and obstructing the molt at all. So yeah, any foliage or anything, if you want any like plants like these and stuff in there, then either keep them very low level where you know your mantis isn't going to choose to molt from there, or do away with them completely. Honestly, you might feel bad giving them a bare enclosure, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a lot healthier for them. They're not going to be risking any kind of broken limbs or loss of limbs or anything, and you're going to have a nice clean molt, hopefully. By all means, like I do, once they've had their actual final molt and they are adult, you know they're never going to molt again, which is obviously really, really sad, but they don't live very long. That's something I've not been mentioning in these videos, is life expectancy. Now, most mantises I have, the males don't live as long as the females. I can keep a female, like my orchid mantis now is probably coming on about 14 months, something like that. Whereas the males tend to go around about 11 months. That's with good care and everything, obviously. That's pretty much standard for most mantids anyway. So yeah, as I was saying, when they're adults, I do tend to like plant out their enclosures or add extra foliage or fake plants or anything, because you know that they're not actually going to have that risk, and it's nice then that they're able to like feel more secure in their environment as they would in the natural environment where they can hide from predators and stuff. So yeah, I do like to do that when they're adults, and it's a really nice thing because you have a larger enclosure then. You are able to plant them out because it's quite hard to keep a like bioactive enclosure for them without running the risk of getting mold build up in there, because that could be really dangerous for your mantis. Okay, that's pretty much it for your enclosure. Now you're also going to want to buy a heat source and something to monitor that heat source. So heat source, always couple it up to a thermostat. So any heat source that you use doesn't overheat, doesn't kill your mantis by overheating, or doesn't actually kill you, you know, in a house fire or something. So always couple them up to a thermostat, and you can then set that to the desired temperature for your specific species. You're going to want to get a hygrometer and a thermometer, so one to measure humidity and the other one to measure temperature. And you can get these little digital ones that are dirt cheap. They come as a 2-in-1 with a little probe that you can pop in. Keep an eye on it and monitor the atmospheric environment for your mantis. The preferred way of heating any type of mantis seems to be overhead heating, just to mimic their natural environment and everything. When they get heated from the top, it's going to mimic what they're like in the wild. So when they're cold, they kind of tend to climb upwards in their enclosure, obviously towards the sun, and then if they're getting a bit too hot, they'll be going down to the bottom. If you've got overhead heating, just make sure it's not like directly pointed at on top of the enclosure or anything. Just bring it away a little bit, and then obviously set your thermostat then to regulate the temperature. Have a little fiddle around with that until you've got the desired temperature for your mantis. I'll tell you what they are now. So at night time, you don't really want the temperature ever dropping below about 19-18 degrees Celsius. And through the day, mid-range of around about 25-26 degrees. You can fluctuate with that though. You can go a little bit higher. I don't tend to go higher than 28 with these types of species, and I don't tend to go lower daytime temperature than around about 20. So as long as it's around about the 25-26 mark, you should be okay, and that can be controlled then, as I said, by your thermostat. So I've mentioned overhead heating, which is the preferred way to heat an enclosure. Alternatively, I use is heat mats, or you can also use heat cable or reptile cable. Be aware though, with these heat cables, only a portion of it actually heats up. Now you can get like however many meters of it, and only about 3/4 of it actually heats up, maybe even half. So just bear that in mind when you're actually buying it. Now with the heat mats and with the repti cable, you can heat multiple enclosures, which is a win-win, especially when you've got as many mantis as I have. As I said about the way that they go up and down, depending on temperature, I therefore use a heat mat or a heat cable on the back of the enclosure rather than on the bottom. So it'll be heating up from the bottom, and it'll kind of confuse, you know, all their senses and everything, and they won't know whether to go up, down, or wherever. On the back, perfectly fine. And again, just make sure that they are coupled up to a thermostat. So on to feeding, it all depends on what age your mantis is at really. So L1, you probably won't have one then because they'll probably be at the breeders, or you might be breeding them yourselves. So they have quite small fruit flies. There's different types of species you can get. I'm not 100% with all the Latin names. There's quite a few of them. L1 to L2, they're on very tiny fruit flies. Now between L2 and L4, they're still on fruit flies. They're probably having a little bit more of them, but they're the bigger versions as well. So these are Drosophila hydi, however you want to say it. That's what they're normally fed on. Around about L4 though, they can sometimes manage like a small house fly, depending on the mantis and the size of the mantis. So from L4 onwards then, I tend to stick with house flies, green bottle flies, blue bottle flies, and when they're a lot older, sometimes they'll take like a dubia roach, quite a small one, or a small Turkestan roach. At any stage, you don't want to give them anything too big to grasp onto, because the weight of it, they can't lift it up and bring her up to their little mouths, love them. I read somewhere that their prey items should round about be the size of their head. Some of my mantas, especially the giant Asians, can take down quite big prey items and they don't have trouble lifting them at all. But yeah, that's kind of the standard thing then, I suppose, is that around about the size of the head. Yeah, if I think about it, house flies, green bottle flies, when they're a bit older, that's where you'd be feeding them, kind of around about the same size as their head. Now when they're younger, you want to throw like a few fruit flies in with them. Now I tend to like shake a few in, and I normally leave about 5 in there, something like that. And then when they've eaten them, whether that's a day or 2 days later, if there's still a couple in there flying around, then I'll top it up and add a few more. When they're a little bit older, then they'll start taking the bigger prey items, and sometimes they'll take 1 or 2 blue bottles starting off, and sometimes they'll start taking a bit more. So it's just basically what they'll take, and you want to keep an eye on the abdomen size. I didn't actually mention this on my other video. You don't want to fill them till they're busting. You'll see their abdomen start growing, and then you don't want to let it get too thin. But I'm not going to get into too much detail about that. I've got another video explaining all of that. Also on that other video, I also explain how I managed to culture up the flies from casters. So obviously they're going to need something to drink. Don't ever put any water bowl or anything in there. I know it might sound like common sense to me, but I don't know who's watching, and if you're completely new, you might not even know this. So yeah, no water bowls, because that's a massive drowning hazard for mantids. I've explained how they breathe and everything in another video, and yeah, it could definitely kill them. So no water bowls whatsoever. What you do want is like a misting bottle. They do actively drink, and you want to mist your enclosure around about twice a day, not directly on the mantis, as they don't tend to like it. They can sometimes throw a fit. So just mist around the mantis twice a day. This also helps then to keep your humidity up if you've got a mantis that requires more humidity. Now this one's going to be around about 60% relative humidity. You can overspray sometimes, and it can be a bit too humid in there, and you can get a bit of a mold build-up sometimes. If your humidity is getting a bit too high, don't take away their water or anything. Don't think, oh, I need to cut down on misting. Cut down on probably the amount of misting you're doing, but still make sure that they've got something to drink. So you mist them at least every day, and maybe just not so much. So that's basically all of the basic care that you need to know. Like I said, I've got the other video, the orchid mantis care video, I've gone into a lot more detail on. It's a 2-parter, so yeah, it is quite lengthy. Generally with most mantis anyway, the way you sex them is exactly the same. So you're counting the abdominal sections. Again, with the budwings, then it will be 6 for your females and 8 for your males. And as I always say, because I'm obviously dirty minded, is that males have a longer appendage. So that's probably this. It's just an easy way of remembering it, isn't it? So yeah, males 8, females 6, so 6 segments for a female. I've mentioned in other videos as well about keeping mantids communally. Now I never do that. This is not something you can do with a Budwing mantis. Mine is like, I think if she was a person, she would be a serial killer or some kind of psychopath. Definitely don't go housing 2 mantids together, and there's no more than 1 to be kept in an enclosure, because they are very cannibalistic. So yeah, you will end up with 1 in the end anyway. And just a couple of pointers, like with the molting especially, that's where a lot of deaths occur, is when people clutter the enclosure up too much, like I said before, and don't provide enough length for their mantis to molt in. Now they say 3 times and 2 times. You can go a bit bigger as well. You don't need to, as long as you don't go smaller, you can go a little bit bigger, as long as they can still find their food. So yeah, I think that is me done for today. I'm really trying my best not. How am I doing? Am I doing good at not rambling? I don't know. Feedback down below. Can you please leave a comment and let me know if I'm rambling too much still? I'm really trying to cut these videos down so that it's easier for you to view, and you're gonna stay here longer and actually absorb the information. You know, a long video you can kind of zone out, can't you? So yeah, let me know down below. So once again, thank you so much for watching my videos. Don't forget, if you want to keep yourself updated and everything, click that subscribe button. Also click the little notification bell, because that'll alarm to you then when my next video is coming out. Failing that, if you want to head over to my Instagram, I'm always active on there, and I tend to give up updates a lot more frequently on Instagram. On to the next video, I suppose, in the series. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.